Hello and welcome to the Virtual College Exploration for all Illinois students, sponsored by the Illinois Association for College Admission Counseling and StriveScan. Thank you for joining us. A few housekeeping announcements before we get started. You can use the Q&A button on your screen to type your questions to our presenter at any time. Your camera and microphone are off so the panelists cannot see or hear you. This is just one of the many different sessions happening, so be sure to check out the full schedule at IACAC.org. This presentation is being recorded and will be available within about a week at that same website, IACAC.org. I'd now like to turn it over to our presenter.
Wonderful. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. I'm very excited to share a little bit about Minerva today. So I'll go ahead and start the presentation. I wanted to just start with a bit of an introduction about who I am and why I'm doing this work right now. So my name is Jess, and I'm originally from Johannesburg, South Africa, but I attended Minerva as a student, and I just graduated in the class of 2020. So I'm very excited to share what the experience was like and talk about the logistics about applying and how it works, but also what the experience was like as a student. And I included this picture here because it's very special to me. You can see here's me at the front. This was my orientation week, very first week at Minerva. I was just surrounded by a group of students from quite literally all over the world, and I'll talk more about the global aspect in just a moment. I was joined by students from all over the world, and we started out as strangers at Ocean Beach in San Francisco, linking arms, hugging one another, ready for this 4-year journey. And upon graduation in May, we really did feel like a family and a community. So I'm excited to share more about that experience. And yeah, this picture always gives me a lot of great memories and reminds me about the very beginning when I had just started and had just finished school. So I'm excited to share more. So Minerva is a 4-year undergraduate institution based in San Francisco, but each semester is in a different country around the world. And I'll talk more about the global aspect in a moment, but I just wanted to kind of frame it and give you something to look forward to hearing about. But the whole point of it is that Minerva prepares top students from around the world to become effective leaders and innovators. And you're probably thinking, yeah, like that's what universities do. They're supposed to be preparing students for the world and to become leaders. And if you're thinking that, you're correct, because around 96% of chief academic officers believe that their institutions are effective at preparing students for the world of work. But only around 11% of employers agree that universities are teaching graduates the skills that they need for success in the workplace. And so there's a gap between the mission of universities and what employers are actually seeing in graduates once they finish their higher education. And based on this gap, Minerva did a lot of research, decades and decades of research into trying to understand what are these skills that are actually needed for graduates to take from their academics to apply to the real world. And these are the 4 things that we found. The first 2 are personal abilities. These are things that you as an individual should be able to do after your education. And one of them is critical thinking, how you make decisions, how you think about evaluating different types of claims. And another one is creative thinking and problem solving. So this is taking a problem and thinking creatively about the things that you can do in order to solve it. So these are personal abilities, but there are also interpersonal abilities, things that have to do with you and the way that you interact with other people, such as effectively communicating, whether you're writing or reading or speaking through multimedia. Any type of communication needs to be done effectively, as well as, of course, effective interaction, such as teamwork, how to negotiate, how to find common ground, and not only in your own interactions, but if you're looking at a system or society, how do you apply those learnings about effective interactions to understanding the world around you? Then based on that research, these are what you're looking at right now on the screen is actually the first-year curriculum at Minerva. So these 4 different core competencies based on skills and fundamental skills that you need in order to succeed in the real world, these were put into an academic context through these 4 classes, and I'll go over them quite quickly. And also, by the way, there's a Q&A. Please feel free to put any questions as we go along, and I'd be happy to answer them. So the first-year curriculum goes as follows. The first course is called Formal Analyses. The focus is on critical thinking. So this is about logic and rational thought, statistics, computational thinking, and formal systems. And I personally, when I was taking this class, I have math anxiety. I'm not really great at coding or anything to do with computational thinking, but taking this class was incredibly beneficial for me, even though I went on to major in something else, because I learned the skills about logic and rational thought that then helped me where I could apply those to social context and to social sciences. So this class is just really all about critical thinking. The next class is called empirical analyses, and this focuses on creative thinking. So using the scientific method to frame problems and think of hypotheses in order to come up with a solution to different types of problem solving. So even though it uses the scientific method, again, this is interdisciplinary and can be applied in different types of subjects. So the focus is on creative thinking. The next class is called multimodal communications. It focuses on effective communication through reading and writing, visual communication, public speaking, body language. Right now, perhaps I'm very small on the screen, but I'm using my hands to gesture and using body language to communicate my thoughts and the things that I'm trying to convey to you. So this class focuses on different types of communication and how to do that effectively. And the last class is called complex systems, which focuses on effective interactions. So understanding collaboration and leadership, using debate to get different perspectives and to interact with other people in a way that is meaningful, again, in your own life, as well as understanding different systems around you, especially complex systems. So this was a great class too. And all of these classes go hand in hand. They're interdisciplinary, and they give you the foundational skills so that you can go on and learn a specific subject. You choose a major, but you have the interdisciplinary skills to do that. So now we'll talk about how that translates into choosing a major. So on the left here, you can see there are these 5 different colleges. That's a liberal arts school, so there's lots of different ways that you could go around this. But there are arts and humanities, computational sciences, natural sciences, social sciences, and business. And then once you choose your major, which is one of these 5, you then choose a concentration within that, and that's when you actually specialize in something specific and you go very deep into the content. So for example, I did social sciences as my major with a concentration in designing societies and mind and emotion. And these classes are mostly focused, designing societies is mostly focused on sociology. You think about different societies and economies and economics within that. And then mind and emotion is a mixture of psychology and cognitive neuroscience. And the reason that I chose to do these concentrations together is because I'm just very interested in understanding how the brain works in order to understand how humans interact with one another. That's why I keep bringing up this example. It's just something that I really enjoyed. But many students decide to do 2 majors, so they do natural sciences and computational sciences, and they choose different concentrations within each one of those to get the interdisciplinary skills that they're looking for. We had students in my cognitive neuroscience classes. I was approaching it from a social sciences perspective, but perhaps they were doing it from a computational sciences perspective. So we were looking at the same subject. How does the brain work? What is the biology of the brain? And they were looking at that from computational sciences. I was looking at it from social sciences. And so we were outside of an academic silo. A lot of the times at an institution, when you choose a major, you end up only taking classes with other people who do the same major. And that's just not really as effective for learning, because you have to be thinking about these types of problems from different perspectives. So having these different ways of going about it is really, really impactful. You can kind of make it aligned with the things that you're interested in doing. So that's the academic component of how the majors and concentrations work. And now that we've spoken a bit about what you can learn, there's also this question of how should students learn and what is the most effective way for students to learn? So Minerva has found a better way to learn. And there's 3 different ways that we do this. The first one is through structured courses. So as I mentioned before, we teach the breadth across different disciplines, as well as the depth into diverse different contexts. And so the things that you're learning in your first year come up again in your second year, come up again in your third year. And it's a scaffolding curriculum that builds upon previous knowledge and previous learning. So instead of just taking one class and then you write your exam and you finish, you actually build upon each class that you take, so that by the time you get to your fourth year, you've gone really, really deep into various different subjects and you've seen how they all interact and work together. So it's a scaffolding curriculum. The second part is based on active learning. So through active class engagement, there's scientific evidence, decades of research about how the brain works and the science of learning that has shown that to be an effective learner, you have to be an active learner. Lectures are a great way to teach, but they're not really a great way to learn. And so you only remember around 10% of what you learn in a lecture. Whereas if you are actively participating in debates and class discussions and going deep into the content in the classroom, you're able to remember and utilize that information in a much more meaningful way, and then also apply it to diverse and novel situations. So there are no lectures at Minerva. Everything is seminar style, with a maximum of 20 students. So you'll go to class, there'll be a maximum of 20 students and the professor is an expert in their field, but they're there to help you, to help facilitate discussion and to help you as a learner be actively engaged. And then the third part that really makes this a better way to learn is the technology that Minerva uses. So we use something called the Forum. It's Minerva's proprietary software that we use for classes. And this really helps the professors to get dynamic discussion-based classes with so much interaction. So you can't just go to class and have your camera off and be a passive participant, because your opinions matter and your opinions and perspectives should be shared. And so we use performance tracking across different courses and over time in order to give students different types of feedback on the work that they're doing and the work that they produce. And this has just been found to be a very, very effective way to learn. Another benefit of this is that given the current situation with everything going on in the world and the ongoing pandemic, the classes at Minerva have not been impacted at all. In fact, it's actually a great way to learn, because this is how Minerva's been doing it, not in response to COVID, but since the creation of the university 8 years ago. And so this is a really, really cool platform, allows students to engage in so many different ways, whether you're looking at a piece of art or you're running code in Jupyter Notebook, or you're reading different types of texts and literature, whatever it is, this platform really enables that active conversation. And of course, academics is incredibly impactful and beneficial, and that's the whole point of higher education. But there is also space for learning beyond academics. And it's been shown that students really need to thrive in multiple different ways in order to become active participants in the real world. And some of these skills are what we call the integrated learning outcomes. And they focus on self-management and wellness, global and cultural dexterity, professional readiness, character and responsibility, and of course, interpersonal engagement. So at your very first semester at Minerva, you're put into different project groups with a company or an organization, a nonprofit, NGO, whatever your interest might be. You're paired with a partner in the city, starting in San Francisco, where you actively work on some sort of project with those people, with people who are dealing with real world contexts around the world. So for example, I am very interested in accessible housing. And in San Francisco, there is a lot of homelessness and rising prices for housing. So I worked with an organization called DMB, where we were focusing on understanding what are the different constraints to policy access and policy development in San Francisco specifically. And we worked on this project with them. We had a project lead, and this was integrated into academics. So I was taking things that I was learning from the classroom about policy and how different societies interact, and thinking about domino effects and thinking about all these different aspects from my classes. And I was applying it to a real world setting. And then I was able to get feedback from my professors, as well as feedback from the partners that we were working with, of my professional readiness and responsibility in the way that I was engaging. And so by the time I finished my first semester, and of course my second semester at Minerva in my first year, I was prepared for a summer internship. I was prepared for a professional experience, because I had something to put on my resume, and I had integrated learning outcomes to combine my academics with the real world and the things that I was learning outside of the classroom. So this is really a great way and is a great way to learn and is very much part of the curriculum. Another part of beyond the classroom is that at Minerva, you study in 7 world cities across the 4 years. So it's based in San Francisco. You start your first year in the city, you live in the dorms, you have access to all the staff who are in San Francisco, and you start off with your community in San Francisco for the first year as you get used to the system and you learn time management and you have all these different experiences. But then in your second year, you go to Seoul in South Korea and then Hyderabad in India. Your third year, you go to Berlin in Germany and then Buenos Aires in Argentina. In your fourth year, you go to London in England and then Taipei, Taiwan. The reason for this is so that you're going to class to learn, but then you're closing your laptop, you're getting out of the classroom, and you're going out to apply it in some very, very meaningful way to the city that you're in. In order to become a global citizen and to have a global mindset, you have to take what you're learning and apply it in different contexts, because staying in a campus bubble or staying in one place does not allow you access all those experiences, those very rich experiences to go out and practice them in the real world. In addition to the different cities, so you're moving around the world with your cohorts, it's the same students for 4 years, but the student body is incredibly diverse too, because we have around 80% international students and 20% students from the US. So even in your classes, you're with people from all around the world. You're hearing different types of conversations and discussions from people who have a background that is different from your own. I definitely experienced this in a class called Designing Constitutions, where we were looking at the Constitution of the US and kind of thinking about the legislator and judicial components and what the origin of the Constitution is. And then I compared that to the Constitution of South Africa, which is much newer because in post-apartheid South Africa, the Constitution was rewritten in 1996, and it focuses on very different things compared to a constitution that is older. We had a student from Libya, a student from Pakistan, a student from Australia in that class. And so we're able to look at the same content and think about constitutions in so many different ways, thinking about the origin and what it means in different economies, what it means with different types of religious law. And so I was learning inside of the classroom, outside of the classroom, and every single conversation was really guided by a very holistic global perspective. So I really, really enjoyed that component of it. And of course, you get to travel to 7 different world cities across the world. So that's a very big part of the academic and social and student experience of Minerva. In each one of these cities, you're not just going as a visitor, you're really trying to have an immersive experience. And so Minerva partners with different companies, organizations, nonprofits, as I mentioned earlier, where you can get involved in what we call civic projects. So you take a project based on something that you're interested in. Some of it can be for grades, some of it is optional. It really depends on what you want to make of that semester, in addition to your full academic course load, of course. And you go out and you participate in different types of projects. Some of these that I'm showing on the screen right now are also summer opportunities. So Mistletoe, for example, is a VC firm in Tokyo, Japan. And they actively recruit from Minerva students every single summer. Students go to Japan, they engage in different projects in their portfolio, and then they have a robust professional experience that the next summer can then help them get that next internship, which gets them the job, which all builds upon each other as students learn about the skills that they're interested in developing. We also have a coaching and talent development team who work with you as a student throughout your 4 years and beyond. So in your first year, in your first semester, you get assigned a coach who helps you think about what types of skills you want to build, what are the different experiences that you need in order to reach your professional goals, and what experiences might you need in order to get there. And they help guide you to choose these different projects that you can be involved in. And those coaches actually stay with you until even after you graduate. So now, even though I graduated, I still have access to my coach. I talk to her very often. She helps me think about my career goals and the things that I'm interested in doing. So it's really a great way to get that professional experience while you're still in university. And the data from last year showed that 100% of students who graduated from Minerva had at least one internship throughout their time. And this could be an internship in the summer or a term time internship, but there really is a lot of emphasis and opportunity to get that professional growth. One more example, because this is something that I did, I'm very interested in education. And so when I was in Buenos Aires, I worked as a policy consultant for the Ministry of Education. And we worked on a policy proposal throughout the 4 months that we were there, focusing on education policy in rural parts of Argentina. And now, even though I left the city, I left in April 2019. Even though I left the city, they're actually using that policy proposal and the data that we found to inform their policy and decision making. So I was able to leave an impact on the community that I was living in Buenos Aires. And I also benefited from it because I was able to put it on my resume, and I'm able to speak about that opportunity where, even though I was a student and I was studying full time, I had an opportunity to apply those skills to something that really mattered to me and mattered to the community that I was in. So lots of professional opportunities there too. So now you're probably thinking, who belongs at Minerva? What type of student is a good fit for a school like this? And there really isn't one specific answer to that question, because everyone at Minerva is from a different background, everyone brings different experiences, and everyone is very highly diverse. But something that Minerva students have in common is that they're intellectually curious, they're deeply driven, and they're truly inspired by the complex challenge of making the world a better place. They're looking for a challenge, they're excited about those complex challenges. You're given something that seems like you can never solve it, and it's a huge task. Minerva students are excited about finding out what questions to ask, where to find the resources to answer these questions. And so, like I said, students are from all different backgrounds. There really isn't one main profile or one main person that Minerva's catering to. It's just a group of really motivated students who want to explore new things and are very open-minded. And I must say, I've been in lots of different settings before. I've traveled around the world. I've lived in so many different places in different countries, but I've never met a community like the students at Minerva, where they just really want to try new things and ask incredible questions and just learn more about everything. So I was very inspired by my classmates, and I'm really glad that I had that community of students. I showed you that photo at the beginning. We started off as strangers, and over the 4 years traveling the world together, answering these questions while we were learning, was very impactful to my own personal growth and the way that I see the world. I'll chat a little bit about admissions too. So Minerva selects top students from around the world based on a couple of different components. One of them is academic excellence, because the courses at Minerva are academically rigorous, but also how students think and solve problems and the things that they have accomplished. So the way that the admissions process works is quite different from other universities. The first part is just basic information through the online application form. This tells us who you are, what you're currently doing, and a little bit about your academic history. Like I said, grades are not the only thing that matter, but we definitely do take it into consideration. But there are all these other components of the application too. So the first part is just basic information. The second part is how you think. And so we don't require, nor do we accept SAT or ACT scores. Again, this is not in response to COVID. This is something that we have intentionally done because we don't think that it's a way to holistically view your application. So we don't require standardized tests, and instead, Minerva has a series of challenges in the application that are designed to see how you think and how you engage. So there's different problem solving activities about creative problem solving and critical thinking. And the point of it is not to get the answer right. It's really just to get a sense of how you think, how you approach the problem, and then how you communicate your thoughts around those different types of problems. And then the third part of the application is what you have achieved. And this includes your past accomplishments, as well as, of course, your academic performance. but I want to focus on the accomplishments because this is a chance for us to get a holistic view of who you are and the things that matter to you. So we look for things like certificates and awards, things that show us activities you've been involved in, but we also look at, and we really do encourage things that are perhaps non-traditional accomplishments. Things like, I can give you some examples, but really things that show us who you are and what matters to you. So we've had an applicant who wrote that they built a raft out of recycled material and they raced it across a lake. And this is something that mattered to them. They built something with their own hands. They did a project from start to finish, and that was impactful for them. So you write the accomplishments as well as the impact that that activity had on you, what it did, the impact it might have had on your family, your community, or society. Another example, we've had students who have been involved in MUN or debate societies or public speaking. People have written about that. We've had students who have told us that they helped look after their younger siblings while their parents were working. Things, again, that show us who you are and what matters to you, even if it's outside, this is especially outside the classroom, but even if it's outside something that is perhaps non-traditional. We also offer needs-based financial aid because Minerva is committed to maintaining the lowest possible costs without sacrificing the quality of an education. And so over here, you can see the full cost, including living expenses and housing for the duration of the year, which is around half the price of other highly selective institutions around the US. The reason for this is because instead of focusing on costs such as maintaining a campus, we instead channel all those costs towards your education. And so we have a motto, kind of an unofficial motto that we say, the city is your campus. So when you're living in Hyderabad or you're in Seoul in South Korea, you go out into the world and you find a library to work in, you find a theatre group to join. There are, of course, still groups at Minerva, and I'm going to talk about those too, like extracurricular groups, but you go out into the city and you find those resources for yourself. My favorite, when I was in London, I used to go to the British Library all the time. For those of you who might have been there, or if you know about it, they have some of the oldest and rarest books in the world, and it's absolutely beautiful and it's free to access. So I would leave my residence hall, I would leave the flat that I was living in, and I would take my notebook and I would go and study in the library, in the British Library. So that's all just to say that the resources are available in the city instead of having to put them on a physical campus in that way. And so we're able to reduce the costs without reducing the quality of the education. And we have financial aid. So the financial aid process is separate from the application, and we don't consider whether you've applied for financial aid or not when we're looking at your application. So it doesn't weigh in at all. Just so that you know that that's not part of the admissions process. And then financial aid is needs-based. So you would submit a CSS profile as well as some documentation about family finances. And then Minerva is committed to meeting needs-based financial aid. And this is in three main ways. The first one is through low interest loans, where it's capped at a certain amount, so you won't be expected to take more than a certain amount each year. And these are low interest that you have plenty of time to pay back after graduation. But the other two components are term time employment and work study opportunities. I mentioned a little bit earlier about the coaching and talent development team. So they actually work with students to find term time employment and work study opportunities that align with their interests. So you're working, you're making money so that you can afford living expenses, flights and visas all fit into this $5,000 of estimated living expenses, and that's the amount of work study too. You use that as a professional opportunity as well. So I was living in India, earning San Francisco wages, working remotely for an NGO based in Kenya. Again, based on education, we were looking at accessible education in Kenya. And so I had something to put on my resume. I had a year of work opportunities during my studying. And of course, I was able to feed myself and actually have something that was meaningful for my professional growth. And then the last part of the financial aid offerings is scholarship grants, where Minerva would cover the rest of the associated fees that you would not be expected to pay back. And this covers tuition, student services, which is access to mental health, as well as other counseling. There's staff that live with you in each one of the cities in the building, and there's local staff members who work on the student experience team. So that's all included in student services. And then residential services is housing expenses. It includes access to some of the fastest Wi-Fi in the world, access to all these different components in your living space. On the screen right now is the admissions calendar. So we have an application deadline coming up soon on November 1st. So that's the early action deadline. And if you applied in that cycle, you would get an admission notification December 15th. We also have another cycle, regular decision 1, that is coming up on January 15th, and another one, regular decision 2, which would be due on March 15th. We also have binding enrollment options. So for students who identify Minerva as their first choice, they will have the opportunity in any cycle to expedite their admissions notification, which means that you will get a decision within 4 weeks of submitting your application. Early action is not binding. So if you did want to submit an application before the November 1st deadline, it's not binding unless you select that it is binding. All of these different cycles have the same type of admissions process. So there isn't a higher likelihood in one or the other. It's just that you would get your admissions decision earlier if you applied in an earlier application cycle. Yeah, so that's just on binding enrollment, just so that you had that information. And the whole application from beginning to end usually takes around 2 hours. So if you are interested in submitting before the early action deadline, you would be able to finish it before then. And I am more than happy, I'm going to show my information on the next slide. I am more than happy to be the person to help and facilitate these, to help you through the admission cycle and to help with the application. I did this application myself, and so I know the different steps and kind of how to guide your thinking around them and to prepare you. Can't give you the answers, again, because there are no correct answers. The whole point of the application is for us to understand who you are, the things that matter to you, the things that you've achieved. And while there are no caps on admissions, meaning if we get 200 applications that are of high quality. Well, last year we got 25,000 applications and we admitted around 200 people. So if we see that there are 200 people, we'll admit them. If there are 150 students who would be a great fit for Minerva, we'll admit them. So no caps and no quotas, which means that you're not competing against anyone else for a spot, because it's, we'll accept people who meet or exceed the bar that we're looking for. So while it's not competitive, because you're not competing against someone else, it is highly selective, but that selectivity is based on your application and who you are. So with that said, I am more than happy to be that contact person for the application or for any questions. And of course, if you'd like to be put into contact with a current student, I'd be happy to facilitate that too. So I'm going to stop this part of the presentation, and I'd be more than happy to answer questions at this point. As Casey, I still can't see the Q&A, so perhaps I'll stop sharing. Okay, there we go. Yeah, so we have a couple more minutes, and I'm more than happy to answer some questions if you have any. And feel free to put them in the Q&A. Okay, and if something that I get asked quite often, which I can answer, is how do you balance work and life and travel and all these different components of the experience, because it can be very time taxing and you're away from your family, and there are so many things that are going on. So I think something that was helpful for me in my first year, I think there's a lot of push from different students to just try everything and say yes to every opportunity. And I was definitely one of those people. But I think exploring those things in my first year was really helpful for me, trying to understand the things that matter to me and how I can apply them later on. And so I did things in theatre, I did things with sport, I tried different innovations in technology. And I really just tried a bunch of different things, but it got very tiring. And so I think just finding that work-life balance of trying different things and being open to new opportunities, while still being able to do the things that align with your interests, they help you grow and develop. So that was very helpful. And yeah, you kind of just learn these life skills because you're not on a physical campus, you don't have your meals provided for you. You have to find out how to do your own laundry, how to find different resources. And so it becomes great life management as well, not just for academics, and really just finding a way to balance those different components has served me very well inside and outside of the classroom, as well as, of course, for professional opportunities. That's a question I get asked very often. Another question is whether in financial aid, the cost of flights and visas is included in the financial aid package. And so Minerva does not provide the financial support for that, but it is included in the estimated living expenses. So I would just work as I did my work study and my term time internships, and I used all of that money to help fund my flights to the different cities. I used it to pay for my different visas, and it depends what passport you hold. So that's something else to consider. Students are from all over the world. So my class had 150 students from 42 different countries. So it depends which passport you hold and which country you're going to. And there might be different expenses for that, but it's all included in the estimated living expenses that are shown in that $5,000 amount, which if you are awarded work study can certainly be covered within that amount too. Then another question I get asked very often is, which was my favorite city? I can't really answer this question because they were all so incredible. I think it depends what you're looking for and really what you make of it. So we went to Seoul, which is just so much technology and innovation, and it's this huge city, and we were living right in the center in a central neighborhood. And the focus of that semester for me was to try and understand a post-war society that is now thriving and is really making a huge impact in the world. I was able to experience that firsthand by being there and getting involved in different projects. And then the next semester we went to Hyderabad, which is a historically Islamic city in the center of India. That's something that I certainly had not been exposed to before. But Hyderabad is also a booming tech hub. There's a new Google campus there. There are just so many technological innovations happening in the city. And living in both of those places in the same year, I was able to see the start of that tech boom, as well as compare it to a place that has passed those stages. And of course, looking around 50 years difference in timeline to understand what that means in terms of how people live and what people are thinking about and how people think about innovation. And it was really just a fantastic learning opportunity for me. So I think that year was one of my favorites, but I also loved San Francisco. That kind of became my home in a way, and I've actually returned. So I'm currently living in California again, decided to continue that. And just something else that I think was beneficial in my thinking about attending Minerva and enrolling is that I got into law school in South Africa, and I was choosing between going to law school there or attending Minerva, and I actually declined my spot at law school, decided to go to Minerva instead, and that's really changed my life in every single way. So lots of different ways that this can come about, lots of ways that it can turn out for different people. But yeah, I'm just more than happy to answer questions. I provided my email earlier on, more than happy to provide answers and really think about if this would be the right fit for you. So I think with that, I might end this portion of the presentation.
Awesome. Thank you, Jess. Share my screen for everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. When you close this window, there will be a link to a very quick 4-question survey. We'd appreciate any feedback you can provide. Also, this was just one of many sessions being hosted, so be sure to sign up for additional sessions at IACAC.org. In about a week, you'll be able to find this session's recording, as well as all other session recordings at IACAC.org. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.